Hello, everybody. We've got another visual pattern challenge for you to think about. The way this works is that you look at this pattern. So we've got step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and your job is to figure out how it's changing and how many, in this case, squares are we going to have in the next step. How many in step 43? That's much more difficult. And could you write an equation that would tell you how many squares we'd have in any step at all? So if you choose to accept that challenge, you can pause the video and give it a try. So what's going on in this pattern? It looks like it gets bigger pretty quickly. So is this just a linear pattern like we've seen before, or is there something else going on here? Is this a quadratic or some other kind of pattern? Well, the way to do that is first just to look at it and see if you can sort of intuitively grasp what's going on with the pattern. And then I think to double check that with a little chart where we'll keep track of the numbers. So if I look at this, I've got this long line here of, what is that, 6 boxes and then a box on top. And then if I look at the next step, well, I've kind of got that same thing from step 1 right up here, but they've added another long line. So it looks like they've added 6 there. And then in step 3, it looks like here's step 2, and they've just added another long line on the bottom. So it looks like they're adding 6 at every step. So let's see how this looks when we make it in a chart. So we'll have the step number, and then we'll have the number of boxes. So in step number 1, there's 6 plus 1, so that's 7. Here we've got 2 rows of 6, that's 12, so that's 13. So step 2 has 13. Step 3 has 3 of these 18, so that's 19. And step 4 has 4 of those, so that's 24, so 25. And then when you get the numbers, what you want to do is find the difference between each step. So you can see what's the rate of change between each step. So 7 and 13, the difference is 6. 13 minus 7 is 6. 19 minus 13 is 6. 25 minus 19 is also 6. Aha. When you have a change between steps that stays the same, is constant from step to step, it's just a linear pattern. So even though this looks like it's getting pretty big pretty fast, it's still a linear pattern. There's no squared term or exponential function or anything like that. And a linear pattern can be modeled with this equation for a line, y equals mx plus b. So the y here represents the number of squares, the x represents the step number, and then these two numbers, those are the ones we have to determine. The m in this equation for a line is usually the slope. In a pattern like this, you can think about it as the rate of change, how much the pattern is growing in each step. And we just figured that out. It goes up by 6 every turn. So our m is going to be 6. And then this b, you can think of it as the number you need to add or subtract to make it work out in each step. And the easiest way to do that, I think, is just to look back at step 1. So we've got 7. We've got this row of 6 plus 1. So if I put in a 1 here, if I said y equals 6 times step 1, I'd get just 6. And I've got 7. So I just need to adjust that by adding 1. In step 2, we could do the same thing. So y equals 6 times step 2 plus, well, 6 times 2 is 12. There are 13, so we'd have to add 1. And you can see it's the same. And this would work out for step 3 and step 4 as well. You can try that on your own. But in this case, we've determined that the b needs to be a positive 1. So we've got our equation for this visual pattern. It's y equals 6x plus 1. And we can use that to figure out any step at all. So if we want to find out the next step, and maybe it's clear you know what the next step is already, but let's plug it into the formula. That would be step number 5. So we'd say y equals 6 times step 5 plus 1. And 6 times 5 is 30 plus 1, so we'd get 31. And maybe in your head you said, well, step 5, we're just going to add another 6, right? So 25 plus 6 would be 31. Comes out the same. How about step 43? Well, that's harder if you're just counting or making a chart, because 43 is going to be pretty far down that chart, but our equation is going to come in really handy in this case. So I've got y equals 6 times step 43 plus 1. And what is 6 times 43? I'm going to do that in my head. I'm going to ask myself, what is 6 times 40 first? And that's 240. And 6 times 3 is 18, so that's 258, and then plus 1. So the number here should be 259. So how did you do with that challenge? Did you get it? Let me know. Thanks, everybody.